Mark?
Such a great kick out of that.
Very originally, my family's from Shanghai, China, but most of my life I've been in New York, so I'm a New York girl.
I was not born in the United States. I was born in the Soviet Union. I came here when I was 12 years old. I moved right to New York. We lived in Brooklyn. And in fact, I commuted all 4 of my years from Brooklyn to Columbia. It was my dream school.
Yeah, well, I grew up most of my life in New Jersey, actually. I've been in New York City since I went to Barnard and never looked back.
It was the best school I got into. Simply put, I love New York City, and this was just, matched my interests and my intellectual curiosities.
Well, I'm a sort of a military brat, so I grew up in North Carolina, and then we moved to Boston, and then I lived in New York. So I've lived all up and down the East Coast. My name is Diane McKoy, and I worked at Columbia University until August.
I got involved with the Barnard alumni community probably the day after I graduated. I'm not so sure, I'm exaggerating. I got involved in the Alumni Association of Barnard College. I joined the Young Alumni Committee, eventually became president of the Alumni Association, which was really a wonderful experience.
It's just a passion. It's a drive. It's something I felt I owe a lot to Columbia, just growing up as a Columbia student and just being a part of this great development.
Columbia Women in Business, one of the most successful student operations on campus. They reached out to me to ask if they could honor me and if I could speak at their conference. And I said, well, I'm really busy. But they said, just come, we'd love to have you meet some of our students. So I went, and I absolutely fell in love with them. I just realized all at once that the kids were great. I kind of missed that when I was a student. I was too busy being the grown-up running my own profession. But to meet the young women and see how smart they were, how organized and full of enthusiasm, totally re-engaged me at Columbia.
Like most people, most New Yorkers, I was in a very intense job, and I paid Columbia no attention until eventually it became my 15th reunion, and I decided I would go. And there were 10 of us, 10 alums, at this dinner out of a class of, 800. And it just struck me that I was thinking about this all wrong, that Columbia gave me an extraordinary toolkit that I probably wouldn't have gotten anyplace else, and it allowed me to engage in a very meaningful career and a very meaningful life here in New York. And it was at that moment that I said I need to get more involved at Columbia, because if nothing else, I need to show them my appreciation.
A lot of my work was really working with the undergraduate population and creating community at Columbia, doing a lot in terms of multicultural affairs, and then also working with students, regardless of their background, feeding people and, food insecurity. I was just known that you're hungry, come to my house on Sunday, I'll feed you and make sure you're okay. And so the alumni, I've known a lot of them since the 1980s. Part of my sort of interest in doing admissions was to make sure that the community at Columbia would be a very broad-based one. And I continued to work with Alumni Affairs at the college in terms of some of that work. So it was a little bit different for me in terms of the award.
Well, let's go back a number of years where there was no CAA, and when I was the chair of the Alumni Relations and Development Committee of the board, it became obvious that there were a number of alumni associations, but they were all school-based, and that there was nothing that thought of the university as a university. And that was negative in terms of brands. So the business school had its own brand, the college had its own brand, but they didn't add up, they didn't lead into a bigger brand called Columbia University. It also had significant negative impacts on fundraising. So Bill Campbell and I started the Columbia Alumni Association, and over time, and with really inspired leadership certainly after I left the board, it became the classical rising tide lifts all boats story.
And I did see over time Columbia Alumni Association. Overall, CAA, CEA, I see everything is growing. I see there's a lot more activity, a lot more thoughtfulness goes into bringing everybody together.
Yeah, I think the CAA, what's pretty amazing is even sitting at commencement, you see all of the different schools, everyone graduating with different degrees, is it really brings everyone together. You're not only identifying with your college or your graduate school, but you're truly identifying as a alumni of Columbia University.
I think the CAA is really an important body. And the more I learn about it, the more I think it's essential to have that. And the fact that it is global and the global diaspora of Columbia alums is really powerful.
Columbia gave me an opportunity to really grow in a lot of different ways. And, and people will always ask me, why didn't you become a dean or director? I said, because the more removed you are and the higher you go, the less time you spend with students. Having the opportunity to travel all over the world, doing admissions and global admissions, and you just can't sort of envision that sort of thing for someone coming from my background, first generation, and if I can tell people like me when I was young, these are the things that you can accomplish and do, then I feel I've served a good purpose in life.